Good morning.
Good morning.
I am not equipped to do video recording at the roastery, so I kind of had to figure something out. Do I sound okay?
You actually sound really good.
Okay, wonderful. Um, and I'm making coffee. Do we have a few minutes for me to make coffee?
We have minutes to make coffee. We're recording now, but man, how's your day going, Coulter? What's happening at the roastery these days?
Huh. Uh, it's wild at the roastery these days. Um, H&S is becoming a little bit more popular. This year especially, but the last month, June was a record month, which was really awesome. And I'm about to launch or drop my July subscriptions for my subscribers,
Nice.
and I'm getting ready for that, making the announcement on what those coffees are, and making sure I have enough for everyone, because I keep growing, and that growth is outpacing the contracts that I'm buying on green coffee, which were months ago. 6 months ago, I was thinking about how much coffee I needed. Now I'm in like kind of a different space. So I'm trying to make sure I'm able to, give all my subscribers good stuff for July. So
Hmm.
that's kind of what I'm working on today. I'm actually very thankful that tomorrow's a national holiday and I can come into work and get some work done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, how are you?
I am good, happy to be able to have this conversation. This morning I brewed up all of these subscription coffees. I'm actually drinking the Santa Librata right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I think I might make that one too. I might make the Librado or I might make the La Papaya here, I think.
Yeah. Both great. You can't
You're
go
enjoying?
wrong.
Are they tasting too fresh or anything like that?
That's a good question. I think you're right that another week would probably be ideal or so, but I don't think they are tasting fresh. I just think they could use a little time off rest. But in
Yeah.
general, they're tasting fantastic. I am very, very happy with these. And yeah, it's so nice to because obviously we cupped your coffees and played around with them and we're like, okay, this is some good stuff. uh, um, but it's wonderful to come back to it and again be like, wow, like again, this is great. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. This morning was a very happy morning for me to just brew each coffee and just be happy with each one. It's like what a lovely time. And I mean, I think I've told you, we sample a lot of roasters because, of being a multi roaster, and we're still looking for slots in our subscription or to, use as a featured roaster or to see if there are genuinely other roasters that are just better than ones we're carrying or, whatnot. And to be able to just brew four coffees from one roaster in a row and all four taste so good is it's so ideal. Like
Yeah.
as weird
Yeah.
as it
Yeah.
sounds, it's harder to come by in a way. We just find a lot of roasteries are good, but not a lot of roasteries are great. And to be able to have a great one like you is just it's ideal. It's what we're looking for. Uh,
I'm
yeah.
thrilled to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they're tasting good. They'll definitely uh, change over the next week, 10 days. You're
Mm.
going to notice a little bit of a change in the cup, which will be interesting. So if they're tasting good now, that's really a good indicator that they're going to taste maybe a little better, but they'll taste a little different for sure in another like 10 days or so. Um, and that's part of the fun, I think, for me too, is coming in and getting to taste my stuff on sort of marked dates as it progresses through a resting period and noticing, oh, today it tastes a little bit more juicy, or
Hmm.
this tastes a little bit more floral. It's starting to open up. That's kind of a fun, like dynamic aspect to coffee and what I'm doing here. I feel like I'm gonna grind real quick,
I
just
love
so just so it doesn't blow your eardrums off.
it.
And I will be right back.
Absolutely.
Okay. Um, so I'm blessed to drink H&S coffee every day, and I get to cycle through and taste them all and be very happy with them. And you can see I have a ton of other roasters up here
Yeah.
in the background. So I've had the experience also of coming in and tasting something, and maybe the brew method's off a little bit, but maybe I just don't enjoy the coffee that much. And
Yeah.
that kind of sets the tone uh, for the day. Um, and then if I come back and I try another coffee and maybe that coffee doesn't work out and I've had two cups in a row that I just don't love, it's such a different feeling that kind of sets me off on a different path for the day versus being able to wake up and have something that's really delightful and that you can be really happy with.
I will say it is encouraging and really neat to see you trying different roasters. Even I think it was last week or the week previous. I don't even remember when, but one of us had texted each other or something, and maybe you were the one who asked like, "What are you drinking these days?" Or I don't know how it came about, but it was neat to like ask you the same question, or for you to just say, "Hey, like I'm drinking these like two or three different roasters right now," and that was, I just never hear that from most any roasters, to be honest. I can only imagine what it's like to work in a roastery, QC your coffee just 24/7, so to speak. And then you on top of that, you're trying other roasters. You're seeing, what their profiles are like, their what producers they work with, what roasters they work on, and how they use them, and all of the above. And so I am personally, I don't know, that inspires me because if we didn't go to other cafes, how do we ever know how we're doing as a cafe, so to speak, And
Yeah,
so, let alone, the cafes in St. Louis, I love. And so I'm so happy to go to them and support those cafes. So it's very neat to hear and see that you're trying other coffees. I actually, if I'm correct, I think I see a September bag on your shelf too. Um,
yeah, I've got a few Septembers.
yeah, which is great because we carry September. So like that's just exciting to be like, yeah, like you get it.
Yeah, and I like September. I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit more later. I really like this Danch, Ethiopia Danch. It's a honey hybrid process. They call it hydro honey.
Interesting.
It's pretty fun. I like it. And yeah, as a whole, September's a great roaster and they're doing really good work.
Yeah.
And Kyle's a fabulously nice person as well.
I I'm not surprised to hear that. I haven't had the chance of meeting him, but I've been able to chat with him on the phone, and just very pretty straightforward and just like, this is who we are, And it's like, all right, that's great. I love who you are so far. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, bringing in other roasters, it's for me, it's a way to triangulate and see what profiles are out there. I like to listen to trends and listen to what people are enjoying, and then I want to try that for myself and see what I think. Um, and that sort of allows me to calibrate against both a roaster that I'm bringing in, but also what I'm hearing out in the world about what people think is really good coffee right now.
That's a great.
Um, and so there's a way for me to sort of calibrate against the world in a way to sort of figure that stuff out. And then there's a lot of green discovery too. I'll taste something and really like it, and then that farm, that producer is now a target for me, and I'm going to try to find coffee from that producer, get the sample process started, and see if it's something that I want to bring in for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a brilliant way of looking at it. We have we have this roastery, Caf Felix, that we work with, and we just got a coffee from a producer in Colombia that they work with. Um, I've been working with him for a couple years now, and I've never had coffee from this producer named Hermel Alvarez. And so we're actually,
Okay.
yeah, and we're about to put it on, I believe, pour over in like a week or so. And I'm very excited just because it's a producer I've never heard of. As far as I know, I don't remember having it, and so just the opportunity to have something different and to discover other things is very exciting to me as well. Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the big drivers for me in coffee, just in as a whole, is the fact that I have been doing specialty for 13 years or so, maybe 14 years now. And I'm still surprised at flavors that I experience in the cup. I'm
Hmm.
still discovering new flavors. Uh, and I think it's probably endless. I'll probably continue this. But it's so nice to have that sort of sense of discovery after so long, to still be able to come in and be totally surprised by a cup and the experience flavors you've never experienced before. I actually have some Cat Felix here too. This is via Airworks. This is subscription drop. This is an Ecuador
Yeah.
Catura.
Hmm.
So my very first exposure to Cat Felix, actually.
Lovely. They like if this gives you a bigger understanding, so to speak, but that of like which roasters we believe in. Yeah, Manhattan and Caf Felix are genuinely like our top two. Because we buy Manhattan is we use for our like daily espresso and our drip coffee, and as well as everything else, and we also just had a Manhattan coffee takeover, so obviously we use them quite a bit. They're just absolutely amazing. Our number one, and then literally our number two is Caf Felix, and I genuinely love them like so much. Actually, this morning was chatting with Victoria, the sales slash everything manager there, and they've just been genuinely the sweetest and the kindest, and just so happy and excited about anything they bring on and any producer they work with and any coffee they have. And so it's to be able to have that relationship and to see someone and the roastery just so excited about their coffees, it makes me
Oh,
more excited about the coffees, as opposed to, oh yeah, like we've got a nice coffee here, like just, or you know what, order whatever you want, you don't even need to ask us. And it's like, but like I want to have that lovely relationship of just like, your coffee's better than me, what do you
mhm.
think I should get, and
Yeah.
obviously, I'm sure that could maybe get tiresome from a roaster's perspective of everyone being like, what should we get from you? Just put our
Mhm.
order together, so to speak. But nonetheless, yeah, I love it.
Well, that's I think that's an important part of developing a relationship on a professional level, and in specialty coffee, is you have to start trusting in the person that you're sourcing from. So you as a
Mm,
cafe, you got to start trusting in me to so that when we're chatting, yeah, I'm going to be able to steer you on the right path. And that comes from developing a relationship and having a lot of talks with you. And that happens to me with importers. Um, I just sent an email to one of my importers that I've been working at for a very long time now and said, hey, I'm looking at this off your spot menu. I'm waiting for Ethiopians to come in right now. And so I just took a look at their spot menu and I said, I kind of like this one. If you think I'm going to like this one, like, let's do it. Sign me up for a bag. I don't need to do a SAS on every single coffee that I bring in. It's
mhm.
an important thing to do, and especially when establishing and starting a new relationship. But there's a trust factor to this whole thing, right? And that goes along with developing community. You know, a community, you trust one another to steer you on the right path, and that's just a natural part of it, I think. And it's great when we're on the same page and we can all agree that the coffee is going to be good. And I can say, you're going to love this La Papaya or you're going to love this Santa Labrada. And you do because it's awesome, right? It's a beautiful coffee.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually a really good point. And yeah, maybe it's something we can even chat a bit later. But now that you've sat down and you're drinking coffee, I'm drinking coffee. I'd kind of like to start with just kind of hearing about your story. You've been in coffee for 13 years, you've said, and man, how does how does a how did it come to that? Of
Right.
of all things. And did you? I think I remember this, but did you grow up in Laramie? Like where? Yeah, tell us your backstory.
Sure. I guess I should start and say my name is Coulter Sunderman,
It's a
and
good idea.
I am the solo owner operator for H&S Coffee Roasters. We are located in Laramie, Wyoming. I am from Cheyenne, Wyoming, which is about an hour away from where I'm at right now. So I was born and raised down the road. Um, how did I get my start? Well, let me also say that Laramie is located at 7,200 feet above sea level. That's about 2,200 meters. So we're a very high elevation roastery, and that affects the way I roast, and it really affects the way that I brew, namely in that my boiling point is 199 degrees Fahrenheit. So I don't ever brew coffee with 205. I don't even really know how to experience my coffee that way, right? So just to lay that out and kind of set the scene a little bit, um, I got my start in specialty. I wanted to be and still desire to be an artist. And so I was working in the commercial design field. I was a designer uh, out of college. That's what I went to school for. I was living in Denver, Colorado at that time. And I would go to the coffee shops and sketch. And that was how I spent most of my evenings, a lot of my mornings. And so I kind of just really fell in love with that coffee shop cafe sort of culture and sort of the artistic kind of side of that. Um, Eventually, I became very disillusioned with commercial arts, with design, with my career field. And I kind of left it all and moved to Laramie. I had friends here. So it wasn't a completely new experience to me, but I kind of dropped everything and just decided I wanted to start over a little bit. I didn't like doing art for other people, executing their visions for design and for the things they wanted. I wanted to do my art. And so to support being an artist, of course, I decided maybe I should work in one of these coffee shops instead of hanging out in them for hours at a time. and spending my money there, maybe they could pay me for me to hang out there for hours at a time, and I could sketch behind the counter. Uh, so that was sort of the introduction to it. I ended up getting a job at a cafe that did specialty, and it was that first cupping, and that was it. It was a natural Ethiopia Sidamo, and it was blueberries in the cup, and it just changed something. It flipped a switch in my brain, and I started chasing those flavors ever since then. Um, and that's sort of the long and short of it. I'm still trying to be an artist, and, but I get to do my art, through some of my own design work for the company, um, and so there's a good balance there now. Finally, since I started H&S, it's been uh, a way to sort of do both things.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's actually kind of interesting that you mention your background in design. We've already had a few people say that your bags actually are fantastic and they are simple and just they're just eye catching. And so
Yeah.
they're nice to just be like, I see that, so it's kind of fun that you do get to do that in your own company. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's changed quite a bit too. I wish I had an old example, but uh, yeah, I don't think I have one. But yeah, that's also cool. I get to kind of play with the branding and the design over time. And whenever I get sort of sick of what I'm looking at, or I feel like it's time for a little bit of a refresh, it's nice to have that flexibility to go ahead and go in and change it. So the new design I do really quite like. I like the visual aspect to it. It's the graphic is sort of related to the experience of the cup. I'm trying to relate a visual representation of what to expect in the cup through color and shape. Um, and then I try to keep the information to a minimum, but I do still get some people missing information in the text. So I do need to start to think about maybe a redesign is going to be coming down the pipe here soon. But
Sure.
yeah, it's really awesome. I really enjoy that aspect of it. Package design is something I definitely do enjoy. So
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
cool. It's a flexible medium to work with coffee.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of nice also because I don't know why, but sometimes this isn't, always the case, but sometimes we'll be cupping roasters and like the design of the bag is like really fun. It's really beautiful, all the above. And the coffee ends up not tasting almost as good as the bag, like
Mm,
looks, so to speak. And that's
sure.
obviously not always the case, but this happens sometimes. And so we've just come to appreciate simple designs. And I think what makes it great for us when we just look at a bag is that we know that what's in the bag is very special. And by you simply putting, to an extent, as little as you can, but trying to mimic what is in the bag, it just gives the customer or the person just a little hint inside and just like a all right, this will be a good one,
Hmm.
anyway, that's just like a random thought on on design
Yeah.
in your bag, but it's very true. Yeah, I really like them, so team good.
I, yeah, I like what you said there. Um, uh, Part of successful branding is managing expectations. Um, and if you're a little too over the top and you can't deliver on that, then yeah, that can be a little bit difficult. Um, and I think for H&S personally, I think that I do want to let the coffee speak for itself. I
Mhm.
want to have something that looks good and is well designed, but I don't want it to be too loud on the branding. And so then also with the notes, the way that I deliver the notes and the notes that I decide on to try to describe a coffee, um, I don't want those things to ever be overdoing it. And for someone to come in and taste a coffee of mine and then say, um, it's not representative of what I saw on the back or see on the label. Um, I think it's much better to kind of undersell in that respect and then over deliver in the cup, and really blow someone's mind when they sip on something. So that's definitely, there's a lot of thought that goes into that when trying to set the colors and trying to set the notes and stuff like that. A lot of it is, what am I tasting? I want to make sure that it's accurate, but it's also about setting expectations for your customer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all the roasters that we work with, anytime we taste their coffees, their tasting notes on the bag always seem to be like 100% accurate. And I mean, it was the exact same with yours. Just dialing in all of our coffees today. I always have like a little thing where it says like roasters, like tasting notes, and then my tasting notes. Because sometimes they vary every once in a while. Or sometimes I'll add a few, or, just depends. And it was just nice to taste them and like, all are the same. I think only like two of them I added a couple different notes, as well as the notes that you had, which is kind of fun. Yeah, it's fun when coffee is just a complex beverage. There's a
Mhm.
lot going on in its tasting notes, and so it's kind of a fun time when you get to be like, oh yeah, those are there, and also maybe these. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And plenty of the coffees I sent you, I think, could be expanded quite a bit on that. There's some real complex ones there in your subscription for the month. And I want to say also that bias is very, very powerful. And so when you say green grape, you're going to taste green grape. Like it's a lot more likely.
Mhm.
I would love to experiment more with sending coffees completely without notes and seeing what comes back. I think that would be very interesting. I do on occasion try to send my customers coffee that just has a word written on the bag, unassociated with any note, and to see what they come back and say to me, what they're tasting. And it's
Mm.
really remarkable when someone will come back to me and pretty much nail it. Like that's really pretty impressive. Um, but bias is very, very powerful. And again, that's about setting expectations for your customer and sort of managing what you want them to taste in a way. And a part of that is setting those notes because that bias is a super powerful tool. You can tell someone to expect to taste something and they'll taste it, even if maybe it's not actually completely reflective in the cup.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and even when I mean, so we have a pour over menu and obviously espressos that we serve in our cafe, and we always have two featured espressos, and we usually have around 6 or 7 pour overs. And it's we have our tasting notes listed, and people ask us which one should I get today or whatnot, and it's like get this one, like this is spot on, these notes are
Mhm.
right, or this one is a little funky, you might actually also taste this, and then yeah, them coming back to us and being like, you're right, like it was there, and it's kind of interesting. We recently had a newer staff member come on, and she was kind of talking to me about, yeah, kind of how priming people in regards to giving them those tasting notes is just such a huge part of them being able to taste it and having an
Mhm.
understanding or a direction of where what to look for. And
Totally.
it is very neat. On one hand, yeah, it's literally what you said. On one hand, it's nice because it does help them. On the other hand, it would be fun sometimes to just be like, just try it, just try it, tell me what yeah.
Uh, amongst professionals like us who taste all the time, it sounds fun. But I think to a customer, again, I think establishing and setting up the framework for someone is probably the best way to go. But maybe for like an April Fool's Day or an Upside Down Day or whatever that you have coming up, yeah, no notes, just take them all away, see what happens.
You see if you like it. Yeah, recently actually I gave a really nice Jansen geisha, from Panama. it was a featured shot to someone who actually used to work for Comet, and just I think gave two very specific notes that just in no way were on the bag. I think they're somewhat in the coffee, but I would never have put those two notes in it, you know.
Mhm.
And so yesterday I was just like, we'll just give you something fun, and I just didn't tell her. And later she's just like, "Oh my gosh, it was just like orange galore and like super peachy." And I was just like, "Great. Like I'm so glad you loved it." Like even though in my mind, I think of other tasting notes, it's like
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. Anyway.
yeah. We're all physically tasting different things, and that you start thinking about that too much, that can get kind of worrisome. But yeah, uh, we're all tasting different things when we're drinking coffee, and it's cool to have a framework that we can all talk about it and sort of agree on things. But you got to leave that door open too, to that not everyone's going to be able to taste the same thing in a coffee, right? And they find it's about finding your own enjoyment and in what you are tasting,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We've started doing one thing, and another thing that we've been doing for a while is public tastings or cuppings, to be honest. And this is honestly the way that we, cupped you and cup most of our samples that come in, is every Saturday after close around 3 or 3:15 p.m. We put all of our samples on the table. We usually have around 24 coffees, and we always cut blind, and so it's very interesting. Sometimes we end up nailing it, and sometimes we're just like different tasting notes, or it just depends. And we usually have two people to sometimes five people who like show up somewhat regularly, who just are into coffee. And so it's very interesting. This one guy comes who's like super into whiskey, and so he almost like picks up more citrus flavors as well as like darker spices and other things. And then, you've got another just coffee geek who comes in, and he picks up all of the florals and all the like berry notes, so it's kind of interesting, seeing how different people taste. And actually, this is kind of just a fun fact. I drink a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. I drink scotch. Wow, I could have gone. I do not drink a lot of scotch. I but I drink, you know, like 2-ish times a week, just at my house because I enjoy scotch. And it's very interesting just tasting the flavors in that. And then same thing, I smoke cigars, like once a week or so. And so even the flavors and cigars are just more spices and more heather and hay, and very interesting. And so it's interesting to kind of get just different flavors from different things, and be able to, I don't know, put pieces together. And so it's kind of a fun thing when I get to do that. And just considering, yeah, having worked in coffee, and just, you just cup all the time, it is what it is. And it's crazy because I'm still, there's so many flavors that I haven't actually tried in my life, and so every once in a while I'll see a flavor on a bag. Actually, the on the La Papaya, the Pluot, um,
Mhm.
I have never actually had Pluot, and so, and I looked it up, and like, all right, like what is this flavor?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is very, very interesting when you get into the world of flavors. Yeah. Well, real quick, going back to you. So you grew up in Cheyenne. You eventually moved to Denver to do some commercial design, and you said, not so sure about this." You moved to Laramie. It was at a cupping. You're like, "Wow, this natural Ethiopia is wild."
Mhm.
So from then on, like when did you say, "Man, like maybe I want to start something in coffee," and kind of how did that come about for you?
Uh, I got very lucky in that job. So I was working as a barista, front of house, and I kind of moved up into being like a shift lead on bar, but definitely sort of cut my teeth there behind bar. And I got very lucky in that the person who ran the roasting operation for this cafe was moving on and moving into a different career herself. And so there was an opening, basically. And I was still unsure if I wanted to make that serious of a commitment to move into roasting, which would have been definitely like more of a full-time job and more of a sort of career focus. And I was still kind of trying to make it this time as a photographer. I'd switched out of art, illustration, design, and I was moving into photography. Um, some people encouraged me to go for it, to go for the roasting job. And so I went for it. And the person who taught me, she was very adamant about systems. And she taught me a very, very solid foundation of the systems involved in roasting coffee and sort of running a roastery. And it's about deliberate and repeated movements, and it's about having a consistent sort of starting spot for each batch. You know, this was 12, 13 years ago. She knew what between batch protocol was, you know, before people were ever talking about it. And it's just part of systems design and systems management. Um, and that also then kind of got me hooked because, as it turns out, I didn't really know that about myself, but um, systems design is something that I'm really into, as it turns out. And having just this very deliberate, repeated sort of framework set up that I could work within, that in a way is sort of restrictive, but then the output of which, the coffee you're getting out, is dynamic and complex and varied all the time, is a really nice balance for me to have. So I started in that, and I took to it just immediately. And so then now, you know, there's two things that I really love about coffee. I love drinking it, and I love the flavors. And now I'm really starting to love roasting it. And there's a craft involved to roasting. There's more data nowadays, and there's more of a science to it, but there's still a craft involved, and there's an artistic process kind of to it. And that just really kept me hooked. But I will say that vertical progress in coffee is really hard to come by. So being able to go from a barista, from cafe level, behind bar type work, up into roasting level, that's vertical movement, but there's not a lot above that. So I was kind of stuck in sort of a production roaster sort of role for quite a few years. I did it in Laramie. I moved to the other corner of the state, of the more famous corner of the state, where Yellowstone National Park, Grand Teton National Park is. I was still trying to make it as a photographer. I was trying to do nature, landscape, photography up there, and I was roasting coffee, and I was working in an art gallery. I was living in my truck with my dog because it's superbly expensive. And yeah, and still, you know, still never really settled on, okay, coffee's the thing, and I'm going to do it until I moved back to Laramie. I had a job opportunity fall through at the university, and I was doing design work again. And I had been consulting with my future business partner. I was consulting him on a cafe, and then he started talking about wanting to do a roastery. And then I was like, okay, well, if you're going to do a roastery in Laramie, Wyoming, I'm going to be a part of that. Like, I kind of shoehorned myself into it. I stepped out of being a consultant and into like, okay, well, I'm going to be a part of this. And then that was kind of a big leap, and there was a big risk involved there in making that happen. But that was the start of H&S, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So 10 years.
Mhm.
We were a partnership for 9 years. We did quite a lot of fun stuff. And then last year, about this time last year, I bought out my partner and took over the business solo. So it's been a year of that, being a solo owner operator.
Yeah.
And that's most of, I think, what might catch us up to present day.
Mhm. No, that's absolutely a wild journey. Honestly, there obviously there are a lot of stories of how people got into coffee, but you're right in regards to having that much of a vertical kind of climb in the industry. It is a bit harder to come by. Even when I was in LA, didn't particularly, I got to a point where even working at a roastery, when I was like soon, kind of scheduled to learn how to roast, I got to a point where I was like, I don't even know if I want to roast.
Mhm,
So for you to move up in such a way to eventually be like, no, yeah, like let's do this. Like if you're doing this, I'm doing it. I'm like,
mhm.
that's a good fun time. Also, this begs the question. I've been dying to ask you this. What does H&S stand for?
Well, which answer should I give? Currently, right now, H&S stands for Ham and Swiss Coffee Roasters. But previously, it was the last names of the two founders of the company. So it was the H, that was my partner, and the S, I'm the S.
Mhm.
Um, and that was it. Just something simple. We had a few other ideas for the name for the company, but landing on H&S, I felt like provided some flexibility in that idea of sort of designing around.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not sure what to do now. Having a former partner's name as part of the branding, but the branding is fairly strong also. And so I mostly just say ham and Swiss these days. I do want to make some stickers up of a ham and Swiss sandwich, or if I can come up with other names to represent the letters, and just running away with it and just seeing what happens. Yeah.
I will say a ham and Swiss croissant is my go-to. Uh, so I wouldn't be opposed to it always staying ham and Swiss. I'm dying. Well, to be honest, I have some more questions, but before I get to them, why don't we actually just start talking about these absolutely lovely coffees that we got from you? And
Yeah.
yeah, the first one that I don't know if it was the first one we ended up talking about. I think it was actually one of the last ones, but we used this one. We got a lot of this one for our approachable, the Rwanda Getaway, if I'm saying
Mhm. Yep. Get way.
it. So, we've noticed in that Rwanda, I think, has had a great year last year. That its harvest was great. We've had quite a bit of Rwandans that have been super tasty, and so I was delighted to be able to have another Rwanda. So how did you kind of just come how did you come across this coffee? And what to an extent led you to be like, yeah, like let, let's let's have this coffee. Like let's go.
Mhm. Uh, I agree with you completely that Rwanda had a really good harvest year. And I do like to present seasonal menus through H&S. I like to be releasing coffees as they're coming in for harvest and sort of present a seasonality sort of aspect to it. So we had Rwanda season very recently, March, April, May of this year. And I came about it through conversations with my importer. This coffee came to me through Falcon Coffees, which is a somewhat new importer to me, and who I'm starting that relationship with. And through just chatting about other coffees, we came onto the topic of Rwanda. My trader there, Corey, was very excited about it. They were giving these coffees pretty high scores. And so I got a sample. I got two samples. Excuse me. I got one sample. No, I got a few samples. I'm looking over here. I've got like, this is like the sample box. So as I just kind of go through, and then I do like, again, I like that blind aspect. So I kind of just label them with a number, and that's the number of the sample that I'm going through this year. So I got through the samples, and I was blind tasting on against Wash Columbia's, against a lot of anaerobic stuff, I think was in this batch of samples. And some other real high quality, high expectation type coffees. And this one cup just really, really, really stood out. And that was the Getaway. And I was really stunned by the cleanliness of the cup. In this cupping that I had, I really didn't pick up on any of the Rwanda tendency towards earthiness in the cup. I think that's a little bit of a marker for Rwandan coffee in general. And so, kind of being absent of that, I was really stunned. And I picked up a contract on that coffee immediately. That was the first, it was the first one that I picked up a contract on of all the samples that I had on the table that day. I just knew I had to have it. And then later, I would complement that contract with a natural equivalent, which would be the Guattari. So they are actually, I believe, I mean, they're the first Rwanda releases for H&S in many, many years. I think year one or year two of H&S, we may have had a Rwandan on the menu, but I'd generally been avoiding Rwanda coffees because of that earthy element to it. There's just, it's really hard to get a very clean cup out. And I'm sure it happens, but it just kind of wasn't on my radar. And I think some of the importers I was working with at the time, maybe only one or two of the importers were even looking at Rwanda themselves. So the opportunity presented itself here through Falcon, and I was stunned and still am. I think this is a really impressive coffee. It's a little bit of a sleeper because it's from Rwanda, but I think vibrancy, the intensity of the cup is definitely going to be a high marker, I think, for the year, especially as we look at Africa and we look at the Kenya season, which I haven't seen anything from Kenya that I like this year. And then Ethiopia, there's so many delays taking place. And I just got my first Ethiopia lot in on Monday, 2 days ago. And I'm just starting to see what the arrivals are tasting like, right? So for Africa for this year, Rwanda's got to be real high up on the list of really great cups and countries that had a great harvest. And so there's still Rwanda on the menu, and you're presenting it in your subscription. So I'm glad that people are going to get to experience it because, yeah, especially the Getaway, I think is just a stunning, beautiful coffee. Really bright, great intensity.
Yeah. Well, I think this will be kind of fun for me to just say, like my tasting notes, ended up I wrote down Sprite,
Oh,
ginger, raspberry, orange as well, um, with like a almost walnut finish, and as it cooled, like almost praline just kind of lingered. But yeah, it was just absolutely delightful. I was
I
just
like
very
those.
happy with it, and Yeah, it's a very funny thing to be tasting Rwandans against different coffees that you would expect to be better, so to speak. And so I think is a great even time for me to ask you. We have a lot of customers and people in the industry who've had Rwandans and Burundis that have kind of had like that potato defect, and recently I don't know if you saw, but Raw Material kind of released a somewhat, I don't know, just like a statement about just that potato defect, and kind of just a little bit more information on it, and kind of encouraging roasters and consumers to buy more from these countries, because these countries are getting better at making sure that isn't a thing, as well as that. Yeah, and just kind of a couple different things. So in your, like, just from a roaster's perspective, kind of, I mean, has that ever been something that, I don't know, you think about, or are you really just like, send me samples, I'll try it, and that's kind of it. Like, you don't even, it's not even in your mind, so to speak. Yeah, what is that kind of like for you?
For me, it's about what I'm going to taste in the cup. I try to make sure that my door is open to receiving samples from anyone and anywhere. And I am often surprised. Um, so I think preconceived notions and ideas about what's going to be good and what's not going to be good on any particular harvest year, you can't really count on that. Uh, and this is a great example of it. Rwanda had objectively great harvest year. These coffees are phenomenal. And if you came into it thinking, oh, these are Rwandans, they're going to be dirty, there's chances of defects, I'm not even going to look at it, then you missed on some great coffees that add, uniqueness to the menu. Um, I love to present a diverse array of coffees from all over the world. It's a huge part of what I'm all about. And so yeah, it's really about what I end up tasting in the cup. And I've not had a potato defect really ever. I've never bought something that came in that had potato defect. I have had samples that came in that had them, and I've had them intentionally. I've asked for potato defect so that I could experience it and kind of see what that's tasting like. So yeah, I think, again, for me, I know it's not everyone, but I like to leave that door open.
Mm.
I love to be surprised. I've discovered so many wonderful coffees this way. Uh, these Rwandans are a good example. I think the Gitwe is on a level above the Guittare. Personally, I like washed coffees. That's probably why. But um,
Mm.
DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, too.
Mm.
I was super surprised by them 3 years ago. I had no idea. I'd never tasted a DRC coffee before, and I ended up buying um, this lot Mapendo for 2, 3 years in a row because it was just sterling. And if I'd never taken that opportunity to just sample, because you can always say no, then I wouldn't have discovered it, And again, that's sort of as I touched on before. I love discovery, and I love being surprised, and I love always being able to experience something new combinations of flavors and dynamics in the cup. It's just what I'm all about.
Mm. Yeah. Well, yeah, this Rwanda is just no exception to being wonderful. And
Mhm.
yeah, you mentioned the guitar, and for basically no one knows this, but but we bought a kilo bag, and I'm very excited. It'll probably go on pour over probably next week. Is We're just kind of waiting for one coffee to run out. um, and so super excited to also be able to have that, just a lovely natural Rwandan on pour over as well. And
the
yeah.
contrast the contrast between them also tells a tale in and of itself.
Mhm.
So a really beautiful, intense wash coffee, and then a syrupy, sweet, thick, natural. They're both red bourbones, and they're both through a Rwandan-based exporter called Rwanda Trading Company,
Mhm.
who's pretty famous for doing very good work in Rwanda. So Uh, Same producer, it's just two different washing stations, same variety, and different processing methods. So it's cool to provide that contrast too, to be able to say this is one side of the Rwanda harvest, and here's another, and they're really quite opposite in it tastes in the cup.
Hmm. Oh, I love it. Yeah, this was when tasting it this morning. Like again, I was just so happy. I was like, this is a tasty coffee. And to be honest, anytime we can get a coffee that's, not from Colombia, not from Ethiopia or Panama, and it is tasty, I could not be more happy.
Yeah.
We've had probably, where I guess this is the seventh month of doing the subscription. And, we've had a few, I think 1 or 2 months where it was just all Colombian.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I was bummed by it in a way. But, working with roasters that just did such a good job, it was just like, yes, like, we'll work with you. But anytime I can get my hands on just almost anything else, I'm very excited and very glad about it. And in fact, last month we had an Indonesian, and um,
Nice.
yeah, for our subscription, it was one of our approachables, and it was a delight. And so to be able to have a Rwandan, and we'll talk about in a little bit, the Ecuador is just I'm very glad about, and it's an opportunity for me to say to our customers, like, these countries are countries to be looking for, and just any other country is worth considering. And it would
Yeah.
be easy for every subscription for our exotics to just both be a Colombia's or a Colombia and a Panama, and so it's really nice anytime I can get any other country in the world. And to be honest, I mean, I mean, they rival, these countries, these Colombians and these, Panamas or Ethiopias. And I'm so glad about that. And it's really neat to see coffees from all over the world shining just so well. And just, dude, it's
Yeah.
wild. It's absolutely wild. Yeah, I love it. Well, moving on to the next one, just for our approachables, this was I was actually like, wow. This Colombia El Pariso, Lot 4 from Ernesto Rodriguez was so good.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
and what a
Yeah.
story here. So then we do start talking about Colombia, and Colombia is one of the very best producing countries. And with this coffee, there's so many ways to approach it. I guess I would start by talking about Ernesto himself. Um, I've been buying coffees from Ernesto, I think for 4 years or for four harvests now, and it's always spectacular. Uh,
Mm,
so in the way that I try to be as a roaster, I try to be very consistent, and I try to put out a consistently excellent product, no matter what it is. Ernesto too is the same way. Everything Ernesto does and puts out is consistently excellent. And as he brings in, as he's able to bring in income year over year that is providing a profit above what it takes for him to just make a living, he's able to reinvest into his farm and into his operations.
mm,
And he's doing things that are increasing the efficiency and the quality of what he does. And so then the next year, he produces a coffee that's a little bit better than the last one. Um, that is of no surprise to anybody. And this coffee is like sort of his bread and butter. This is just a straight wash Couture. It is a field blend. He grows, I think in this lot, there was also some Sidra and I think Columbia variety, but it's majority Couture.
mhm.
And this is the sort of the bread and butter for Ernesto. This is how Ernesto is going to make his living.
Yeah.
And it's a straight wash process in the Columbia fashion. And it's just so beautiful. This is actually very similar to my very first exposure to this farm and to Ernesto's coffees. And previously, this coffee won a Good Food Award in 2022 for a very, very, very similar lot. And it's just beautiful. And this is not a it's not a geisha. This isn't a alternatively processed coffee
Yeah.
with lots of steps in it. Um, it is not expensive. For
Mm.
me, it wasn't a very expensive green. It's a pretty standard price. It sort of operates in that region of the price um, spread where you are helping a farmer out more sort of at this price. If you're buying super expensive coffees, that farmer's probably already making a good living. If a farmer can afford to do a wash geisha,
Yeah.
uh, they're probably can afford to take that risk as well. But for a farmer who needs to make a living off of a wash couture field blend, this is sort of the best way, I think, to be spending money and feeling like it's doing the most good because it's probably providing the most help for someone to actually make a living. And then we can talk about the quality and just the stunning beauty of the cup and how outrageously sweet it is. It's cloyingly sweet. I put ice cream. It starts with orange creamsicle as my first note, but ice cream every note that you taste in this coffee because there's
Mm.
so much sweetness attached to it, creaminess attached to it, and just all in all, just a beautiful sessionable cup, and
Mm.
definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Uh, I was just so I'm just so happy to be able to buy coffee like this from a producer like Ernettis and to do it, every year, year over year.
Yeah. This was such a good one. Yeah. Honestly, your tasting notes again, just so spot on. I literally the first note that personally I tasted was truly that orange creamsicle. It was like,
Mhm.
what is going on? I and that's like a tasting note that I think I've only ever tasted like one other time, like a few years back, like just very specifically. And so I was just like wild, just absolutely, just genuinely like a wow factor to this coffee. And yeah, I wrote down, raspberry limeade almost.
Mhm.
Almost like drinking an ice water, but with lemon in it, just like that, just like, just really nice, clean lemon taste to it. And I don't know if you'd agree with this, but so I think the green grape was in there, but I described it as a dried out green grape gummy finish, like a green grape gummy that was like left out and it dried a little bit, but then you taste it and it's still like juicy, but not as like juicy as you would think, Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's not juicy in the same way as like the Getway is. Its juiciness is definitely heavier and more syrupy.
Mm.
And the green grape, I've also felt like I could have replaced that with kiwi, kind of
Mm.
kiwi vibe to it a few times. And then this is sort of a couture thing. This is sort of a Columbia thing, but a little bit of a vanilla in the finish. And again, that sort of reinforces to me sort of an ice cream, sort of like a vanilla ice cream, raspberry vanilla ice cream or whatever. And,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, interesting. Those are interesting notes you have. I'll have to wrap my mind around a left out, dried up grape gummy. If you have any of those, maybe you could send me one. I could try it out.
you know, that's also, it's just funny that like, where your mind goes when you're tasting stuff, because I that this is a tasting note that I've never specifically written down. I've written like green grape gummy, but this was like one of those words just like, I think it's that, but I think it's dry. I was like, huh. I think that's what it reminds me of, and so just every once in a while, but it was yeah, it was such a good coffee. And
Mhm.
this one actually, and the Rwanda Getaway, um, just in terms of brewing it, I actually grounded both at the same setting, maybe you found different settings work best, but just in general, I did like 16 clicks on like a Commandante, and the Getway came out around 4 minutes, and this came out just a little under, and both. What was nice about both is they both were great on my first brew, and
Mhm.
and it was so nice because I think both I could almost have dialed in a little bit more, but just for the first brew, I was just like, this is amazing, and so in my very one brew for each, it was like I think these coffees will just taste good, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The El Paiso is I have this tagged as a light roast,
Mm,
whereas the Getway, uh, sort of surprisingly, I have tagged as an ultra light roast. And there is a small difference between the two. I'm glad that they brewed somewhat similarly for you. That's a good sign for me. I like to kind of hear that feedback. But the Getway would be a little less soluble. The El Paiso would be a little bit more soluble if you're brewing at the exact same recipe.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah. Well, just absolutely delightful. That definitely is one of those coffees that, man, just it was just so good. Like,
And
and
it's regular coffee. There's nothing really spectacular. I mean, it's a spectacular coffee, but this again to emphasize this is this farmer's regular work. This is
mm,
his baseline bulk lot that
mm,
provides the majority of his income for the year. So, he's this is what he relies on to actually make his living. The extra money, maybe he can take risks in doing. I know he's doing some sidras, and I think he might be trying to start doing geishas and stuff like that. But this is what you know that he does to just make a living, and it's awesome to see that because it's tasting, sort of executing at such a high level.
oh yeah. And what I think is even funnier is this coffee being so good paired with you sending us your sticker of boring washed Katura.
Oh
Just
yeah,
amazing. I Our staff got such a kick out of those stickers,
nice.
like just such a kick. And we're giving out as many as we can with each subscription. And it's just so funny because it's coffees like this that are very clearly not boring washed Katura.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that I'll touch on that briefly. So, boring washed coffee was a phrase that was coined by Luca, and I apologize, I don't remember Luca's last name. He lived in Australia. He was quite a large influence in the Australian specialty community. He still is. I don't know if he still works in coffee, but uh, he's pretty outspoken. He has a lot of strong opinions about coffee, what's good and what's bad, and he sort of coined this phrase to describe the desire to taste, just have something like this El Paiso, just a beautiful washed coffee, but a boring washed coffee in its process. Um, this phrase kind of got picked up and it turned into a boring washed Katura.
Mhm.
And again, sort of out of that same desire for uh, a community that I'm involved in, to their desire to just experience just a nice, simple washed coffee. And sometimes that's just what you want.
Mhm.
And so I kind of picked up on that and ran with it. And I released a bunch of Columbias in a row that were varying degrees of boring. A lot of them had an extra processing step, and I'm sure we'll touch on extra processing here today. But this one finally is legitimately, even though it's a field blend, this is a legitimately boring washed coffee, um, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful and enchanting, and got to be, yeah, probably one of the crowd favorites, I bet, for your
Oh,
subscription.
oh yes, just absolutely tasty. And in fact, it's kind of neat to hear this because I don't know why specifically, but September, like Kyle has almost in every wash couture he's released, he's like, here's another example of a really good wash couture.
Mhm.
And we've been able to, have a couple of those on our menu, which have just been great. And it's just neat to see them done so well. And it's genuinely exciting. And
Mhm.
to be able to taste this coffee was just like, it just in my mind didn't even taste like a washed couture because as years have gone on, I've just thought that that is a boring coffee, and so that in my mind, I'm like, this is not boring. This is a truly wonderful expression of this variety, and just couldn't be happier to have it. And to think that this is his kind of daily coffee that pays the bills and whatnot. Oh
Yeah,
man, absolutely killing it. Just
totally is. Yeah,
yeah.
100%. Uh, I want to clarify, Luca Costanzo came up with the moniker for boring wash coffee.
Okay.
And I had another thing I wanted to say, but it's lost me. Maybe it'll come back.
You can come back to it at any time.
Oh, I will say this, not to overinflate myself, but roasting a coffee like this takes skill because it's really bare. There's not a lot of extra in the process that's going to come through in the green at a very large window of profiles. Um, this is just a straight washed couture, and to really get it into that zone where it's going to taste that beautiful, that takes an amount of skill to get there too. I got to say.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can only imagine being someone who has never roasted before already. So uh, I'm already amazed that you roast it well. So the fact that you also roasted this coffee well, good, good Lord, I do not know how anyone does it. So I'm glad there are people like you out there to roast for me.
I'm
I'm
very
done.
happy, but
I
yeah,
love it. Well, moving on to this Ecuador, which is absolutely lovely. I think this is one of the first probably expressions from La Papaya that we've maybe ever carried. I'm sure we've had a La Papaya years ago, either before me, and it's possible we did have one when I first started that we carried from another roaster.
I'd hope so.
It's a genuine pleasure to have something from Juan Peña, or however you say his name. But you know, how did you come across this? Could you tell us a wee bit about Juan? And yeah, and just what's your thoughts on this coffee? Because it was lovely. It was absolutely lovely.
Yeah, La Papaya, a legendary farm. Juan Peña, a legendary producer. I was first exposed to this coffee through competition and in hearing and reading about the top placers in the United States Barista Competition World Barista Championship, uh, using Juan Peña washed Typica. It was Typica back then. And Juan still calls this Typica. But I think genetically it's Mesurado. It sure tastes like it. I can't, I don't know the real truth to what is it actually is as a variety, but it certainly tastes like Mesurado. I will refer to it on the website as Typica Mesurado. So, yeah, that was my first exposure to it, and I was like, I was just always thinking, how can I get this coffee? How could I ever get this coffee for myself? This was many years ago, eight plus years ago probably. Um, and I I wasn't doing direct trade back then. That was a very difficult concept for me to wrap my head around, being a tiny roaster in the middle of nowhere in Laramie. Direct
Mm,
trade felt like an impossibility. So I did eventually, I think, first become exposed to La Papaya coffees. I think it was through Royal Coffee, Royal Coffee importers in San Francisco, in Oakland, excuse me, uh, through their, I think it was on their Crown Jewel program.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh, like there's accessible green from La Papaya. I can buy it. That's amazing. Bought it instantly, loved it, fell in love with it, everything I wanted it to be.
Right.
And then shortly after, La Papaya started their own exporting company, and it's tied into their processing center, and that's called Cafe Exporto.
Mhm.
And so I started being able to buy directly through Cafe Exporto, and that was really nice for someone as small as me and in my position who doesn't have a lot of buying power to be able to make direct trade a feasible pursuit.
Mhm.
So I'm very thankful that a place like Cafe Exporto is able to operate and exist and be able to move La Papaya coffees through it. So I've been doing that now for several years, 4 or 5 years now. I've been buying, and it's just thrilling. This is a legendary coffee, a legendary farm,
Mm.
and a legendary producer who's always been at the forefront of excellence and quality.
Mhm.
And so this year, in years past, also I've bought some pretty wild processes from La Papaya, the oak barrel anaerobics and anaerobic based cedras and things of that nature. This year, I really wanted to go uh, with wash coffees. So I got pretty much the staple standard hallmark wash measurado. I mean, this is the emblematic coffee for La Papaya. And I was able to secure and complement that with a wash geisha, which
Mm.
is also phenomenal, but
Mm.
very, very quickly sold out. And I wasn't able to get very much of it to start with. So it's just the Wash La Papaya. I'm really thrilled that you got this one for your subscription because it is such an emblematic coffee, and I think it represents sort of um, one side of an ideal for specialty, because they've been doing this at this level for so long. For as long as I've been in the industry, La Papaya has been producing excellent, high quality coffees. And
Mhm.
like I said, this is the one. This is the washed Tipica Mesurado. Like this is like the coffee that I think kind of made them famous. It made a lot of baristas famous, um, who used them in competition, and it's still here all these years later, tasting excellent. And we discussed Rwanda having a great harvest season. Ecuador also had a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal harvest season.
Yeah. 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 No, this is an absolute delight of a coffee, and it's been neat. I think the beginning of this year kind of, I don't know, it just shot off in such a way that we started having Ecuadors here and there. And that was kind of exciting. In recent years, I don't particularly remember having any specific Ecuadors that I was very excited about. And to be honest, I may have forgotten, who's to say? But this year, we've had so many wonderful Ecuadors. We really started with El Alisal out of Ecuador, having a Mejorado from there. Then we had some, lovely Pepe Hijons, and so also Mejorado from there. And then to be able to have one from La Papaya is just like, we're having too much fun, and
Mhm.
just I've just been so happy with this variety because it's just very high quality, like you said. It's remarkably just delicate and clean, and so it's just, it makes me so happy. And actually being at Expo, I got to, meet Pepe Hijon and his son Jose. And, I didn't know, and I still don't know very much about this variety, but Jose was at least telling me like we're really trying to kind of have this, variety be like Ecuador's big shining variety, so to speak. And I was like, hey, and it is really shining. and I was just so happy brewing this coffee. I will say this coffee I had to brew a few times, just to get kind of where it was. I started like too fine, and then I went a little too coarse. But then
Mhm.
bringing it back, I was like, all right, we've got it, and so yeah, just to be able to have a la papaya, and yeah, I didn't know about recently, and that La Papaya, that they kind of haven't, that they are exporters or whatnot, kind of, and so that
Mhm.
that's very 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 neat. Yeah, and to be able to have anything from him is just so good. And your notes were spot on. Like I said earlier, I had to look up Pluot.
Yeah.
Pluot. Am I saying it correctly?
Blue up. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it was absolutely delightful. Green grape, I wrote down cherry candy and then pluot, but
Sure.
maybe candied pluot is what I
Mhm.
was tasting. Um, just nice and floral and delicate texture, and just super enjoyable to
Mhm.
drink. It does genuinely remind me of the quality of a geisha. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
so I'm just very, very happy that we can continue to have Ecuadors. And to be honest, we're getting another, Ecuadorian, that's another mejorada that we'll be putting on our menu next week. And it's just like, it's so neat to be able to continually now have Ecuadors that are just really tasty.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So very happy. Yeah.
A few harvests ago, Ecuador had a down year, and I think that tempered people's expectations moving forward. And then you come into a harvest season like this, and the quality's off the charts, and it's sort of like, yeah, this is Ecuador. Like, this is sort of more of the usual from Ecuador. Um, what I love about this variety. I I love what you related, talking to Pepe about the variety and what sort of he wants to do with it. Um, that's really cool to hear because it's a super unique variety. I agree with you. I think it can compete with geisha in terms of delicacy in the cup, complexity in the cup, and floral character. And I like to relate green coffee as having a certain amount of information in the bean. And my job is to interpret that information and bring it out. And the Mesurado variety is full of information, and you can push and pull it in different ways in the roaster. You can go into more sugar development in this variety and still maintain a beautiful, complex, excellent cup that's going to be omega sweet, and it's going to have a chocolate or a caramel note in a way that's really pleasant. It's not necessarily roasty,
Hmm.
but you can also go the other way and push it really, really light and emphasize that floral character and the floral finish on this. And so it's a coffee with it's a variety with a lot of information in it and a huge, huge potential. And definitely, I would say, that would be the emblematic variety of Ecuador, certainly.
Yeah.
That and Cedra, I guess there's a lot of Cedra, but Cedra's kind of in a lot of other places. But Mesurado, it's just, yeah, what a stunner. Beautiful stuff.
That's so good. Yeah, I again, like I said as well, I don't know too much about this variety. You know, I did read actually right before our call. I don't know how true this is, but I was kind of looking at what different roasters say about it, or companies or whatever, and I did read somewhere that it's like it's both like an Ethiopian heirloom and like a Bourbon or something. Uh,
I think that's right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, which is very interesting that and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, the Cedra and Chiroso are kind of both also genetically, and the Pink Bourbon, two Ethiopian heirlooms, so to
Yep.
speak. And so,
That's right.
very interesting, to just continually, find these coffees in Central and the South America that are
Mhm.
just very high cup quality and just so enjoyable to drink. And of course, they go back to Ethiopia, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they all do, right, in the
Mhm.
grand scheme. Uh, but yes, I think it is. It's really fun to sort of trace what a farmer in Central or South America is finding this really interesting, cool, dynamic flavor profile, and so they'll isolate and then propagate that variety, and then call it something like Coulter Choroso, and then you do if genetic testing is done, you find it's like 95% Ethiopia landrace. Uh, and but the flavor profile is quite a bit different too, from a regular Ethiopia landrace that we're all used to. So yeah, that's really fun to trace. It can make my job somewhat difficult sometimes if I'm trying to relay a story or an information about a coffee. And so I usually have to just default to what uh, the farmer or the farm is calling it. For instance, with La Papaya, they do call this a typica. Still on the menu, it is a washed typica. And they don't really say Mesurado at all. So that's sort of a risk that I take in calling it a Mesurado because I don't want to get that wrong, right? And I want to make sure I'm interpreting what I'm buying correctly. So it's fun. It can sometimes be a little bit frustrating, but yeah, all roads eventually lead back to Ethiopia.
It's quite true.
Right.
I'm dying. Well, moving on to kind of the last coffee that we had in our subscription was, and this one is kind of for the people who decided to get two exotics, which I think we had about six people or so, who get kind of both exotics. This was their second one, and this was just so much fun. And
Mhm.
to be honest, I'm unsure if I've ever had anything from Santa Librada, or if I have, I kind of forgot about it, or just never paid attention. And so, uh, absolutely delightful coffee. Yeah, tell us a wee bit about this coffee.
Yeah, this one is a huge surprise to me as well. Santa Librada, this is a competition placing coffee, a competition winner. The competition is called Huila Magico, and it was started by Coffee Quest. Coffee Quest is the importer for this coffee. Coffee Quest also imported the El Paiso lot for in your subscription. So they started this competition in 2020 in the throes of all the chaos and uncertainty of the world. Farmers at Origin were trying to figure out how they were going to get paid and how they were going to make it through a harvest season. And so this competition was founded purely to just generate income for farmers. That was the sole point. And so they highlighted from the Huila region, the probably most famous region in Colombia for coffee. Uh, Through that competition came just lots of spectacular coffees, and it's now become a yearly event and something I look forward to every year because the quality is really ridiculous
Mhm.
coming out of Huila Magico. I cupped the top 5 coffees from the Huila Magico winners this year. Hernandez Rodriguez took third place this year in Huila Magico. This Santa Librada was second place. And it is brand new to me too. I believe this producer is Edwin Carvajal, and I hope I'm saying that right. I'm This is a completely new producer to me, completely new farm to me, but hugely on my radar now because this coffee is uh, it's the most intense coffee I think that I've released this year. I love intensity in coffee. It's one of the things I try to pursue as a roaster through my roast profile and style. And this is the one. I've described it as being neon like in its intensity, and it's unreal. It's a beautiful coffee, a pink bourbon, washed And I actually just yesterday may have received some information I need to follow up on regarding whether or not this received an anaerobic step at the beginning of the processing, but it definitely doesn't show up in the cup as it's just pure, juicy, intense neon acidities abound in this one. Super tropical. Um, I released this coffee. I mean, last month was kind of wild for drops, but this coffee, along with the La Papaya Wash Geisha, the La Papaya Wash Mesurado, the El Paiso washed couture field blend, and then a very cool co-ferment, a very fruit punchy coffee called Los Patios. And I think this one, it could be my favorite. It's
Mm,
definitely one that I'm going to be thinking about towards the end of the year, starting to recap how the year went. This is a definite highlight.
yeah. No, this coffee was spot on, and it's just being intense and fruity and punchy. And I just couldn't be more happy about that. Like again, just those tasty notes are spot on. Like you had said pink lemonade and like juicy mouthfeel and like pomegranate and mango, and it's just
Mhm.
like, yep, I get them all in this coffee. And it's so neat to have a pink bourbon that's not like a double anaerobic or like whatever. And so even if there is an element of anaerobic to this coffee, nonetheless, it is more clean than I would have thought it to be.
Oh yeah.
Every once in a while, we'll get like a pink bourbon sample from someone, if it's washed or natural, whatever. And sometimes it's just I don't know. Like obviously, pink bourbon's delightful, but every once in a while, we'll find like sometimes like a muddled, almost body, so to speak. Not always,
Mm.
but every once in a while. And so it was just striking to me that this was just so clean. Like it seemed more so than usual to an extent,
Yep.
um, which was really pleasant. And it just this is just and again, it's one of those coffees that like you're so happy to drink every day, but you're not overwhelmed by it. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Of what I just listed from the June releases for me, that we discussed the El Paiso, and that is a standard wash coffee, straight down the middle. And this Santa Librada, I think, is definitely a cleaner cup. And again, like I said, I have to verify this information, so I'll need to go speak with my importer and see what's up with this. But I marked it as a wash coffee. I'm selling as a wash coffee. It's definitely the cleanest cup um, that I've had in quite some time. I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah. No, it's so good. And all these coffees, I just could not be more happy to have. And I think we've chatted a wee bit about making sure we get H&S on our shelves and possibly doing a takeover, which would be amazing. And so I'm
Mhm.
remarkably excited about these things, which I've already like put in the calendar, so to speak, and other things. And it's neat because like I mean we're in St. Louis, we're not in Chicago or we're not in New York, we're not in LA or Seattle, and so to be honest, the idea of having any roaster come to St. Louis, so to speak, to be able to represent their own coffees means a lot to us. And you know so I think I mentioned we have another roastery also doing a takeover in September, and they're out of Phoenix called Moxie. And so the idea of them even coming all the way from Phoenix is like that's wild, like I'm just actually surprised, so to speak. And so yeah, I will say though that the owner, he's either from Phoenix or somewhere else out west, but the sales manager may also be coming, and he's originally from St. Louis, so like that kind of tracks.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you come out here, that would be pretty tight.
I would love that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'll say uh, St. Louis is a big city, right? I live in Laramie, Wyoming. My population is about 35,000 people here in my town. So uh, it's a big city sort of venture for me. So don't think like you're just some tiny little town there in called St. Louis. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun for me too. It'll be cool. And I've not really, like I sort of said at the very beginning here, for 9 years, H&S was a really small roaster, mostly focused on wholesale that was regional. And it really was just in the last year, and really just this year, that H&S has started to catch on with multi-roasters like yourself, and sort of starting to expand that presence. So this is sort of a beginning stages for me, and having the opportunity to be on a multi-roaster cafe menu like yours, and one in a cafe you're really putting in the work to make sure that you're yourself sourcing really good coffees. That's really cool to see for me, and I definitely want to be a part of that. And it's about community, right? Like, I know we're however many hundreds of miles apart, 1,000 miles apart, but we're all part of the same community, right?
We, we are. I will say, now that I'm thinking about you living in Laramie, I don't know if I've even told you this, but I don't probably only 3 times, but I've I've spent quite a bit of time either driving to like Montana and back, or going out there in Wyoming and that area, because a huge fan of Montana, Wyoming, to be honest. And so it's possible that I may do a road trip in a year or two, and I may just stop by Laramie
Oh
just
yeah,
by.
you you enjoy H&S coffees. I'm sure you are brewing them well, but if you step into this roastery, into this room where I'm at right now, and you let me brew you coffee, uh, I'm going to show you the perfect picture of what I'm trying to do here, right? The perfect outcome, and we'll have a very good time. It'll be a lot of
Oh,
fun. Yeah.
oh yeah. It's crazy that like there's so many, there's a decent amount of good roasters, but we now have kind of a small-ish list, about 15 or so roasters that like we're working with a decent amount, kind of including H&S going forward, so to speak. And I really want to make it a point at some, within 5 years, to kind of do like a US, like meet the few roasters that we work with, and want to continue working with, and Europe, and maybe a little further down the line go to Asia. So that's
Wow.
just very far away, but it would just be so neat, because I mean, having that relationship is very like, it's just very, I don't know, I value it quite a bit. And I really don't know where I got it from. It's probably just being told, having relationships is just more special. Like, I really don't know, but it's something that, I'm really excited about. And even this month, I think, might be the first time that, so we're starting now once a month or so, doing a cupping of a roastery that we are carrying, and doing their whole lineup, and kind of uh, just giving a space for us to talk about the roaster, and so like this month we're doing Leaves, out of Tokyo. And
Hmm.
it just gives me the, ability to, if anyone does come, to be like, this is who Leaves is, and we like them.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And so to be able to, obviously go to, or have you come, is just like, it's so special. And so in my mind, for you to brew your coffee in our cafe is, you know, it really is just such an honor. And it's the funniest thing too, because again, from my perspective, we're just a cafe, and so to be able to brew what we think are some of the best roasteries in the world, like, that's wild, and it's in a way, it's wild that you would be like, yeah, like, hope you brew my coffee well for your subscription. Like, that is just, it's a wee bit like, wow, like, you, like like you said earlier, you're just kind of trusting me, like,
Hmm.
do, do a good job. And it, yeah.
Well, David, I had a high confidence uh, in you and in Comet through our talks, leading up to this. It's clear you're putting in a huge amount of work, and it really is a lot of work. Tasting through, you'd mentioned, I think, 24 blind cups, and you're doing that pretty regularly. That's a lot of work, a lot of labor.
Mm.
And so going through that and committing to it uh, puts puts you on a different level, I think, as a multi roaster, and so I had a lot of confidence going in. I definitely am very nervous uh, for the outcome here because some of these coffees can be very difficult to brew. These ultralight roasts that I have marked, they can be fickle and they can have small windows for success for brewing. But I know that they're well roasted and I know that they're good coffees. So I'm confident that they'll get there and you know how to dial things around. I'm quite nervous that if I do come visit and I'm going to brew, like I said, I've never brewed my coffee with 205-degree water. So I have no idea what's going to happen. It could be a disaster. I'm
Yeah,
gonna be tongue, it's it's nerve
yeah.
wracking.
I mean, if you can imagine on brew, we have the kettle set to 210, um,
I've
which
never seen mine goes to 199 and it stops. I've never seen it go.
it stops. We will go no further.
It
Yeah,
boils. It's just boiling.
yeah, it's wild, and it's crazy too because our water filtration system, it's not the best, and so we're still working with around 200 ppm, which is
Oh
very
wow.
it's a lot of water or a lot of hardness,
Yeah, that's hard.
and to be able to still brew the coffees that we do and that we're somehow still able to get great results is just wild. Um, and I couldn't be happier that we still are able to do that, to be honest. Yeah, yeah. It's
Oh, that's very surprising to hear. That's very hard water.
yeah,
That's quite a
really is.
bit from what I use here. I do have hard water here in Laramie,
Yeah,
but I make my all my own water. So
yeah,
I have gallons and gallons and gallons of pre-mixed water sitting over here on the shelf.
yeah. It's wild, and in a random, well, not quite random, but because of that, certain roasteries, obviously you're a roaster, you roast for, to an extent, some sort of water,
Yep.
and we have had multiple samples from Scandinavian countries that simply we cannot get good results
Yep.
because they truly roast for like almost like 30 to 60 ppm, and it's just like we just cannot get anything out of these coffees, and
Mhm.
they're like, yeah, that we've actually had other people complain about this because just we genuinely roast for our water, which is really soft, and it's like it is what it is, and yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I mean. That's probably what every roaster ends up doing, whether they're aware of it or not. They are roasting for the water. They're roasting for the water that they use to QC with,
Mm.
right? And so that becomes a huge influence on the outcome of the roast profile. Living in Laramie, the way that our aquifers work, we have multiple aquifers that, depending on where water is being used in the municipality, one aquifer might drain down, and that means the other three are going to have a larger influence for that one day on the water supply, and that will change the hardness that's coming out of the tap. And so there's a lot to be said also about consistency of the uh, hardness of the water, because that can change depending on where you are day to day, season to season. We
Right.
get we get runoff from the mountains
Mhm.
that enters the water supply, and that will raise the hardness of the water during this season right now during summer.
Yeah.
And so that will end up changing the way a roaster is going to roast their coffee. They'll sit down at a cupping and taste something as being too light or too dark, and they'll make an adjustment to the profile when really that profile might be fine, but it's the water that changed on them. So
Yeah.
that's a huge, huge issue. I don't think
Mm.
a lot of people account for, and it's one of the things that I think makes me very consistent and able to sort of operate the way that I do, is because I have a very specific water construction, and I use that specifically for QC, and that informs my roasting process. And that's how I'm able to stay on one track with what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's absolutely wonderful.
It's the water.
It's the water. Dude, I mean, 98%, 98%
Yeah.
plus is just coffee's just water. It's a lot of it.
Hmm.
It's wild. Yeah. Yeah.
And constructing water is a pain, and I go through so much water, so much distilled water.
Yeah, sounds about right.
I do need to try to find a better solution, in line, something that I can construct and build, because yeah, it's difficult, but it's another part of the process. And like, and sort of like with you and with cupping, and really make sure you're sticking to that, and that you're understanding what different roasters are presenting and putting forth, and not just going off of how pretty the bag looks or how hype the roaster is on Instagram or whatever. Um, it takes work, it takes labor, and it's repeated, deliberate movements over and over and over again. That's how you master something,
Yeah.
and that's what it takes to be good in this industry.
Let's go. In good team.
Hmm.
Well, to be honest, I did have a few other questions, but I think we're coming up on like almost 2 hours.
Are we really?
We might be. If I'm correct.
An
Um
hour 40? Yeah.
40 or so. Yeah. So I think I'll go ahead and and call it for the most part. Is there anything else that you would just like to add to, all the people who are trying your coffee, or just anything else in general?
Um, I do. I have a thought that I do want to touch on. It's not so much related to me. It's more related to the industry at large.
Mm.
And we sort of touched on it as we went through the coffees from the subscription. Uh, and it would be the advent of all of this alternative processing that's taking place.
Mm.
I want to say that it, there is uh, room, there's room for all of this, in coffee. And as I sort of describe my journey, and I go back to that very first coffee that I drank on a cupping table that blew my mind, a natural Sadamo. Going on 13 years in the industry, if I come across a coffee now at this stage of my career that blows my mind the way that that very first cup did, then there's something special going on there. And the um, expansion of available flavor combinations that are coming out due to all of this unique experimental processing taking place is unlike, I think, anything maybe we've ever had in coffee before. And to be able to discover and find those flavors, I think it's inevitable. I think it can add value to the green. It can add value to the payout that a farmer is going to get.
Mm.
And yeah, it's inevitable. So just be ready for it. Any organization out there that's pushing back against this and saying that only wash coffees are legitimate or only natural coffees are legitimate,
Mhm.
is missing the point, I think, or at least they're missing the point as I see it, which is that uh, I'm in this for flavor discovery. I'm in this for new and interesting experiences that's coming out of a single thing. We're already in a remarkable place with coffee where we're tasting flavors that we've never expected to have coming out of a cup of coffee, right? And now, um, I put balsamic vinegar as a note on a bag recently. I might have sent you one. I think I sent you a few extras,
Yeah.
but coffee this El Divicio. Um, from Nestor Lasso, and it changed the way I think about coffee completely. And to experience that at this point in my career as a roaster is really powerful, and it's inevitable. It's going to happen. So I urge everyone to get on board with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to release, hopefully later this month, I'm going to release 4 coffees in a pack that are all this illegal processing. And I hope to really expand the conversation about it, because I think I'm going to put a Parmesan cheese note on one of these coffees too. So, it's what it's about. It's what it's about for me. That's the part that I really love. And just get ready for change in the industry. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen in this area.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought this up because I was like thinking of bringing it up, so to speak, because it is a big topic right now, and I'm
Yeah,
actually talking quite a bit with probably between 5 and 10 roasters all about this, and coffees that they're carrying and that we're thinking of carrying or that we are currently carrying or all of the above. And actually next month our roaster that we're using for our subscription will have a couple crazy ones, and I actually am excited about it because I'm excited to talk about it more and
yeah,
kind of give our thoughts and just how we as just a cafe and what our customers think, as well as as far as we understand what it's doing for the producers and the roasters, and it is interesting. It's wild, and it really is like you said, it's almost like the next thing it's opening flavors in just a whole new way, and it's wild. It is genuinely wild, and I don't think I would have even 2 years ago thought that I would ever be tasting some of the flavors that we're now tasting because of it. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, that, like I said, there's room for both. We
Mm,
just opined about how beautiful this regular washed Couture is, and how beautiful that can be. And
mhm,
then again, on the other side of that, to have something really bold and not at all sessionable, but that has a, uh, a balsamic vinegar note to it, or a Parmesan cheese note, or a savory, meaty note to it.
mhm.
Uh, I think there's room for all of it, and it changes. They're very different from a roaster's perspective too. So a roaster can't be roasting these coffees the same way that they're roasting other coffees. There's quite a bit of a difference to them. Something I hope to expand on more myself, but as roasters get better at roasting these coffees, I think the attitudes of them being bin juice or funk bombs or what have you, I think that'll start to change a little bit. They'll still be very loud and in your face, I'm sure, but like it's great to be able to, just like you said, discover a flavor that 2 or 3 years ago you would have never thought that would exist in a coffee, and now they're becoming quite prolific.
Mhm.
And there's cases probably to be made both ways, but there is certainly a case to be made where you can take a mid green and you can increase the cup score on it, and therefore increase the price for it. And so that's going to be a powerful tool moving forward.
Yeah. I can only imagine being someone in that position to figure that out and be like, "Oof, if we do this,
Mhm.
could be really great for us," as well as just for the coffee in general, which is a whole other thing. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
And to that end, I'll shout out Diego Bermudez,
of course.
whom I got to listen to his story in
Mm,
Chicago earlier this year, and very much an experiment based process for him that ended up creating this whole thing, and now is turning into a very sort of burgeoning and expanding um, way to increase quality across the board. So big shout out to Diego Bermudez. Nestor Lasso is the one who changed the way I think about roasting.
Yeah.
I have two more Nestor Lassos coffees coming in that I definitely am excited to explore. Because yeah, I want to put a Parmesan cheese note on a coffee. I really want that, and I want that flavor to show up in the cup. You
Yeah.
know, it's not for everyone, but the uniqueness of that experience is just something I want to be able to create and to share with people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's crazy that during the Manhattan Coffee Takeover, we got to have Diego's his Hatchie number one,
Oh, wow.
the
Cool.
Chiroso. We also got to cup for 3 weeks in a row with customers the Lorena anti maceration,
Yeah.
also absolutely amazing. And then, all of his, not to mention all of his other crazy coffees, the Luna, Salma, Samuel Jr., and Letty Bermudez coffees that are all thermal shock, using either leachate or Mosta or, just
Mhm.
all these crazy things. And it really is crazy what he's done. And to be honest, I think he has done the best job at it. And so I am very excited to see where it goes and what people in the industry will continue to say. And
Yeah.
it's
It's just starting out, like it's very much in infancy. The outcomes are not guaranteed. So there's a lot of risk involved, but it will get better and it will get refined. And again, like I said, roasters will start to figure out and refine their approach to roasting these coffees. And then that changes the outcome in the cup. And then you as a brewer and in a cafe setting, again, that brewing them is probably going to be a little bit different. But over time, yeah, I think the 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 opportunity is just massive, and it's very, very exciting. Like, how cool is it to be able to experience this in our industry, and
yeah,
to be shocked and wowed and awed by new experiences over and
yeah,
over again. That's what makes coffee just so beautiful.
yeah, let's go. Love it.
Yeah, really.
Well, that is a perfect way to end our call. This has been an absolute pleasure, Coulter. I can't thank you enough for everything. The conversations have been wonderful, and you and I will continue them. And very excited to figure out a time for you to come to St. Louis and to then kind of introduce you to St. Louis as we begin to carry you. And oh man, good stuff's on the horizon. It's just figuring out a time to do. I
Yeah.
love it. But no,
Uh,
can't.
thank thank you for having me, David. Really, yeah, absolute pleasure. Our conversations have been wonderful. 2 hours on here, and it doesn't really feel like it. So, I hope everyone else finds this as interesting as we do.
I hope
And
so too.
yeah,
I'm sure
and I
they will.
very much look forward to coming to St. Louis and visiting. That would be great. Really, absolutely stellar.
I love it. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we will chat soon, Coulter.
Thank you very much. You too, David. Take care. Bye.